So last year I made a video showing you my initial impression of the Destination E bike rack by Hollywood Racks, designed specifically with electric bikes in mind. Now I'll link that video if you want to see the full installation, setup, initial impressions. But I've owned this rack for more than a year now, and in that time I've learned a lot about the things I like, don't like. I've made some modifications and added some accessories, and ultimately, I'm still really happy I chose this rack over all the other racks out there. I'll get into all that in a bit with a pretty detailed comparison. And just so you know, this is all my honest opinion. I have 50 subscribers. I can assure you this is not a sponsored video or anything, so let's get into it. So what do I like so far? Well, the bikes haven't fallen off for starters. My wife and I both have these Rad Power Rad City 5 Plus models, which I have some mixed opinions about. After the proprietary controller died on my high step here, had to wait about 5 months on back order, but now we're back in business, so we've been to plenty of local greenway trails in our area, drop off and pick up at a local mechanic. We've actually also taken some longer trips, the longest being about 500 miles round trip to Virginia. So it's seen a lot, but it's still in great condition. The plastic components have held up really well. The rubber has some wearing where it contacts other parts of the rack, but that's expected. All the locks, the clamps, the ramp, everything works pretty much exactly the way it did when we bought it. The one thing that did seem a little daunting at first was all the little steps to get the bike secured, but after maybe 4 or 5 times doing it, it really does get a lot easier. I timed it now. We can go from the rack stored in the garage to being fully set up and ready to drive away in under 4 minutes now. And then obviously things like being able to open the trunk with the bikes on, locking the hitch and bike clamps, so we have some peace of mind there, stowing the rack when the bikes aren't on it. These are all things that most other racks at this price range do offer, but are just some of my favorite features I figured I'd mention. So what am I not the biggest fan of? Well, really it's just a lot of little things that aren't necessarily deal breakers, but just minor inconveniences that I've noticed over time. So for one, when you're loading bikes using the ramp, there can be some awkwardness, sort of tilting to get everything in place. When you're loading the first bike, the pedals have a tendency of running into the rack itself, and then on the second bike, I have to tilt around the handlebars and then make sure that the pedals don't collide if they're positioned just right. And that's why I'll usually just pick the bike straight up to avoid all that. Second, getting the clamp arms adjusted once you get the bike where you want it can be a little bit tricky. This second longer arm in particular. Luckily, there's just enough clearance on my Ford Explorer to swing that arm over the first bike, but other cars may not leave enough room. And then there's positioning it in place, which got a little bit trickier once I started using this bike lock. So I don't clamp it there. I chose to clamp it to the seat post. Of course, in doing that, I have to lift the clamp over, move it to the right to clear the seat, and then move it back to the left to get it in position. But it does have this tendency to get stuck, so I can either shimmy it or I can unclamp and then clamp it back in position. All things that aren't necessarily hard, they're just cumbersome when you're trying to make sure that the 60-pound bike doesn't fall. And then another thing is the lock at the hitch. Locking's fine, but when you need to take the rack off, there's this module that makes it really hard to pull the lock off without busting my hand a little bit unless I'm really gentle with it. So yeah, in general, I'd have to say all the little twisting and securing you have to do can get a little tedious compared to some of the other racks I've seen where you literally just put the bike on and then push a lever down to tighten it. All right, and then the last thing is this creaking sound that's developed, and I've waited until evening because it only happens in cooler temperatures. But basically, whenever there's rotational force applied, you can hear there's some sort of metal rubbing or something. It doesn't really happen on the highway, only at slow speeds like over big bumps or really hard turns. So I don't think it's necessarily a problem, but I'm just keeping an eye on it. All right, so with that, I wanted to talk through some of the cool things we've done to this bike rack. As you probably noticed, we added these LED light strips for turn signal and brake. We also have a license plate mount, which includes an LED light just to make it fully code compliant. I know there's a lot of people that get by without these, but I know just in the short time that we owned the bike before installing these, there was an instance where we were driving on the highway, a cop pulled right behind us, we made our exit, did a couple more turns, he was still following us, I was convinced he was going to pull us over, and then right as we entered the parking for the trail we were going to bike at, he decided to just keep driving. So just a word of warning there, you can get by for a little bit or a long time, but it is technically a problem just to have your license plate obscured like that. So we decided to take advantage of the towing package installed on our car. Now, unfortunately, it did require some drilling through the metal here for the license plate mount, and also just some basic wire splicing. Without going into a whole lot of detail, I'll just show you, at a high level here. I started with a 4-pin extension cable, and then I needed a way to basically connect both the auxiliary lights and the license plate light. The auxiliary light comes with a basic 4-pin connector that can plug right into the extension cable, but the license plate light was just 2 bare wires. So I ended up splitting up the individual wires of the extension cable at one point, exposing the bare brown wire, which is the positive, and then the white, which is the ground. and then tapping into the license plate light wires at those points. There are many ways you can do this. You have to be a little handy. I recommend just doing something so it stays waterproof. So then for installing everything, I drilled 3 holes for the license plate mount, 2 on the sides to secure it, and then 1 in the middle for the wires to go through. I filled all that with silicone just to give it more protection. Then there are also 4 small holes that I drilled, so I could attach zip ties to secure the bundle of cables, but be able to access it later if needed. Then I added some basic wire loom here just to make everything look a little more discreet, and added the dust cover to use when it's not connected to the car. And then for the auxiliary lights, they just stick on, and then I used more zip ties for a clean look. And this is what you end up with. So it's worked well so far. I actually managed to acquire a 3rd license plate, so now we just leave that main one back on too. I'm not sure if that's necessarily best practice, but it's worked for us so far. And yeah, so when we have the rack stowed with no bikes on, we just make sure to leave it unplugged so that the light isn't shining in people's faces. And that's pretty much the whole setup. Some other small things, we added this foam pipe insulation just to protect things a bit, mainly in case I accidentally trigger the trunk to open. This would protect things just from getting dinged up a little bit. Alright, so another thing for storage, I really needed a way to get the rack and the bikes out of the way for the winter. So I stumbled on this store your board hitch wall mount, sort of like the hitch on your car, except it just attaches to your wall. It can support up to 175 pounds. We raise ours up a little bit, which makes it a little more difficult to get the bikes on, but once they're on, we're good for the whole winter. We can fit a sedan in here, no problem. You may have also noticed I beefed up the area around the studs, and we also use a wood block just for some extra additional support. Just push that in place. I contacted Hollywood Racks. They said, it's actually fine all winter without that, but we're at about 170 pounds all in here, so just, want to play it safe. And the last thing I wanted to mention, we haven't really used this yet, but we have a Team Obsidian extra large bike cover just in case it plans on raining during our trip. I've heard using these are pretty controversial. You're basically putting a giant windscreen on the back of your car, so it could put excess stress on the rack and the hitch. So if we were going to use this, it would make sure that we're parked or that we're maybe going really slow on the highway. And I think that covers everything. There's not really anything else I feel like we're missing now, and these were all really helpful additions, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on them and the rack itself. So now we come to the end, and I just want to talk a little bit about how the Destination E compares to some of the other big name racks out there. Now, not much has changed in the past year. Prices are still around $500 to $1,000, and I'll admit there's a lot of options out there, many from lesser known companies that you can take a chance with and risk, but given the value of my bikes, I'm really only looking at those top really proven, reputable companies. So I'd include Hollywood Racks, Thule, One Up, and maybe Kuat. And when you look at their main electric bike geared racks, this is where everything stacks up. So we'll start with the Destination E. I would describe it as being very accessible, accommodating. You get good quality at a good cost. You get the 46-inch ramp. In some aspects may be a little more time consuming during setup, but there's a lot lower barrier for entry. You get the generous 70-pound weight limit. You get compatibility with fenders and step-throughs. It comes with all the basic features like locks, a stow position, a trunk access position, but do know that the rack is not rated for RVs. All right, so now let's look at some of the competition. So we'll start with another Hollywood Racks model, their original electric bike rack, the Sportrider SE. This one is a lot more bare bones, but the cheapest on our list. This one uses an arm that clamps onto the middle of the frame of your bike. No ramp included. You need an adapter for step-through bikes, but it can hold up to 80 pounds, and there is an RV-compatible version available. All right, so next we come to the Thule line and the T2 Pro XTR. Now this one can only handle up to 60 pounds per bike, which technically does work for MyRad Cities if you take the batteries off, but you're cutting it very close, and it's also a bit pricey at $800. But what you do get is a solid Thule product that I think has a really nice rugged look, and you can also add an additional 2 bikes with a separate add-on. Unfortunately, there's no ramp, and this one clamps down on your tire, so it's not ideal if you have fenders. I've heard of people making it work, but just know that it really wasn't designed for that. So then we come to the next one of the most popular Thule racks, which is the EasyFold XT. And this one is very similar to the design of the Destination E, but if I'm being completely honest, from what I've heard, you're paying a lot more for something that comes off feeling a lot cheaper. The ramp is shorter at 36 inches, the weight limit is less, there's no stow position to bring the rack flush with the back of the car, and everything just kind of seems to have a cheap plasticky look and feel in my opinion. What you do get though is an included license plate mount, which the Destination E does not have, so it's up to you whether all that's worth an extra $300. All right, so now we'll move on to what is probably my second pick after the Destination E, which is the One Up Super Duty. This one's no frills, similarly priced at $680. Things like ramps and locks aren't included, but you can buy locks separately. This one uses clamps on the front and back tires, so again, not ideal with fenders, but this one isn't as bad as the T2 design, and I believe you can clamp it out of the way of the fender if you can position it just right. Now, I didn't go this route mainly because of aesthetics. I just really like that streamlined look of the Destination E. The One Up has a very mechanical look and feel, and I've heard it can be a little awkward to use at times, but it's really just a matter of personal preference there. Last on the list is the Kuat NV 2.0. This one, in my opinion, looks the coolest, but you do have a pretty high cost of $849, and with that comes a low weight limit of 60 pounds per bike and no ramp. This one's very close to the style of the T2 Pro XTR, and the clamping style is the same, so it's not easily fender compatible, but again, you get a really sleek look and a very easy to use product if you can make it work and are okay with the price point. So yeah, overall, I'm still pretty confident in my choice of the Destination E over all the other options out there, but the One Up Super Duty is a tough contender. The T2 Pro XTR if we had lighter bikes and an unlimited budget, and the Sportrider SE if I was just trying to keep costs low. But really, I'd look at the features of each one, what's a hard requirement for you, what can you live without, and get a rack that works for you and your budget. So I hope this really helped you guys out. These electric bike racks, they're expensive, I get it, but personally, I do think it's worth the price of admission to be able to travel all across the country with your bike if you want to. Just going around our neighborhood was fun, but something like this really took it to the next level. So yeah, best of luck and thanks for watching.